How to capitalize on the final 50% of this bull market. Are you wishing you made more during this bull market so far? Or maybe you just entered and are sitting at a loss with this current pullback. Well, in today's episode, we're going to help you make the most out of what is left in this bull market, which, by the way, we believe there's still plenty of the way to go. I brought in none other than DeFi Dad to give us his insights on how to play the next year in crypto. DeFi Dad is a longtime super user in crypto. He's an educator and an investor doing angel investing and part of 4RC. He's also the co-host and producer of the Edge podcast. So this man knows a thing or two about crypto. Welcome to Milk Road Radio, the easiest path to get smarter about crypto. I'm Kyle Reedhead, your host for today's show, and I believe that on-chain is the next online. This is the opportunity, and we're here to help you capitalize on it. All right, let's waste no time. Let's get into the episode.
Crypto will go up more than 100x in both users and value over the next decade. If you're listening to this right now, you're extremely early and have an incredible opportunity to capitalize. At Milk Road, our mission is to make you smarter about crypto. That's why we're doing today's podcast and why we send you a daily newsletter for free. But if you're ready to level up as an investor, then let me tell you about Milk Road Pro. We crafted this resource for investors who are already smart enough about crypto and are looking for more actionable insights on how to invest successfully in one of the fastest growing industries on earth. Every week, we break down the latest trends, dive into tokenomics of popular and up-and-coming tokens, and get into the nitty-gritty of market analysis, all to help you invest smarter. Plus, we have a private Discord community for pro members. It's like your backstage pass to the Milk Road crew, exclusive insights, hot tips, and live AMAs with our team. Now, if you're looking to level up as an investor, then click the link in the show notes below and sign up to Pro today. Don't let this bull market opportunity slip through your fingers.
DeFi Dad, welcome to Milk Road Radio. It's good to have you on the show.
Kyle, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I know you've got a great podcast yourself, and so that's why I wanted to get you on. And you've interviewed so many people in the space, and so it's time to flip the script, get you on the other side, and start interviewing you. But before we get into that, why don't you quickly just give our listeners a bit of a background of kind of who you are and how you got into this space?
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. So my career in crypto started around 2017, and I had a background that, I was working in tech, and I kind of spent all my time trying to sell and piece together pieces of software like CRMs and marketing automation. So when I first learned about crypto, even the idea of the money Lego, which I think that came about more in 2018, 2019, it all started to click. And so I did the usual thing. I listened to podcasts and started to realize that hey, the finance system doesn't make as much sense to me. I think I was actually fortunate I didn't have a strong background in finance. And in 2018, I got a job with Consensus, got to work with a bunch of companies like MetaMask, Infura, Gitcoin. It's just wild because nothing worked back then. These were the few things that were working. There wasn't DeFi was so early that you had heard of Compound and Maker, but Maker was really the one thing that seemed to be making sense. Anyways, things really came together in 2019, 2020. I was putting together these live events called Ethereal through Consensus. And I was interviewing and meeting people privately. I was just interviewing them and asking questions like, would you want to give a talk at these live events to help inspire the next generation or maybe the first generation of builders in Ethereum? And it all clicked. I looked at DeFi and was like, wait a sec, I know how to use MetaMask. I can see on Compound that there was something like 10 or 20 million in it at the time. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you could earn maybe 20% interest on DAI. And it just blew my mind because I was playing with really small amounts of money and realizing what the big dogs were doing, how much money they were able to earn there. And man, from there, it just took off. I started tweeting about it. I was just trying to share examples of how I use DeFi. And eventually that led to joining Zapper in 2020. I joined Zapper in 2020 as the second or third hire. And then I ended up moving on from there to where I am now at Fourth Revolution Capital. And so I've just over the years continued to try to demonstrate how easy DeFi is to use, that crypto is not that complicated. If anything, I think it's a reflection of the complications of traditional finance. And it's better because it's permissionless, it's trustless, it's in the best case, it doesn't matter what geo you're in. You should be able to have access to it as long as you have access to the internet. And nowadays I actually focus most of my time on the storytelling element. I really enjoy being in your position, interviewing folks through the Edge podcast. So we try to interview all of the best builders and investors in the space. And I spend just a tremendous amount of time, though, thinking about how do you make DeFi and crypto digestible for the average person. And then I get the privilege of investing in teams as an angel and through the fund. So anyways, yeah, that's how I ended up here today.
Awesome. So super user and still super user today, I would say, turned into angel investor, which is, I think, a fairly common trend in crypto, right? You use the stuff, you play around with it, you fall in love with it. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to give back by investing capital. Do you also do a lot of work with the businesses that you're investing in terms of helping them to grow or whatever that might be? Yeah,
I think I'm most proud of, I'm very proactive with any team that I invest in, whether again, as an angel or through 4RC. I think my edge in the space is I'm still a power user. I am transacting, I would say on the order of I'm doing maybe a dozen transactions a day. Sometimes it's just simple stuff. I'm claiming rewards and I'm, selling it on a DEX for profits. But I just spend a lot of time playing with applications, and I've heard others in the space, other investors talk about this. And sometimes I think there is a bit of LARPing that goes on. Everybody claims they're a user now, but I think getting into the weeds of that application, like with restaking, I've spent a lot of time on restaking over the past year, and restaking wasn't really a thing until really the end of 2023 and start of 2024. But Nomadic, my co-host through the Edge podcast, and we co-invest as angels and through 4RC. It was just so obvious at the end of that year, because we were thinking as someone who held a liquid staking token, like Steph by Lido, we were excited to be able to earn more yield, and we could kind of see where the puck was going. We had the privilege, of course, of interviewing founders in the restaking space. And so then we started to invest. We really had the privilege of just thinking and interviewing these people all of 2023 and into 2024. And then that's when we were able to start to actually put money to work. That's my driving thesis as an investor. I really just keep myself busy playing with as many applications as possible. Sometimes I stumble into stuff, just, I would argue it's luck, because I'm playing around with it and realizing myself that there's a gap in the user experience. Pendle might even be another great example. We were playing around with that in 2023 and felt like we were late to the game. But then when Pendle started supporting all of the different points programs, we knew that it was prime time. We understood how the mechanism worked. We knew as users how addictive it was to use it. And so it made sense, these LRT protocols are just going to blow up, and everything else after it, like Athena, is going to get really, really big just by using that hub for speculating.
I think a lot of our listeners try to figure out, how can I get in first? How can I get in early? And I think what you've just said to start off this episode is the best way, which is just use this stuff, right? If you're sitting there trying to get more yield, you're trying to do better in DeFi, it was pretty obvious that liquid restaking was a way to get more yield and also earn some airdrops, right? But it's difficult if you're not actually using this stuff every single day. So it's quite interesting to hear, that's how you became as good an investor as you are. Just literally use the stuff, and then it's not too hard to get in early. So really cool. Let's step back a bit. Let's zoom out. And before we get into, I do want to talk about some airdrop stuff, some restaking stuff. Yeah. But first, let's just talk about where we are in this cycle. Do you think we're in a cycle, just like we've been in the past 3 cycles that we've had in crypto? And if so, where are we at? What are you kind of thinking in terms of your timelines for maybe the top, or just kind of how this all plays out?
Yeah. So back at ETH Denver in February, I was asking everyone this, everyone I interviewed, I'm like, where do you think we are in this cycle? And there was a general consensus that we were 50% of the way through. However, I believe it was at ETH Denver right around that time, Bitcoin hit a new high, which I'm sure threw you and me and everyone else for a loop. we're not used to seeing Bitcoin hit a new high until after the halving. So that's probably been the hardest part of this cycle. Is I think, as simple and maybe dumb as it sounds, that has been a milestone that we hit after the halving. And it's made a lot of us question, are we further along than expected? I think if you were to zoom out, though, like one of the big differences, of course, is that we have just huge inflows of capital into Bitcoin through the Bitcoin ETF. The Bitcoin ETF is something that we've all gotten used to, but it's a milestone that we shouldn't overlook. And there's just so much money that's seeing the state of inflation across the world, and it's looking for a store of value. And I think Bitcoin clearly has like the best brand in the world. You know, it's the most recognizable. It's got traditional finance influencers, if you want to call them that. Like they don't get called influencers, but that's what they are. You know, they're out there talking about what they hold, and they're going on CNBC and Fox Business. I actually thought we were 50% of the way through maybe a few months ago. And I'm starting to wonder if now we're 50% of the way through, which would take us to, like, let's say the end of 2024 into 2025. I think with an election year, it's hard to imagine it not being bullish through the end of the year, for the reason that is as simple as, in an election year in the United States or any country that's paying attention, there's a hope and optimism that like your candidate can do better. I think we have two of the worst candidates in the history of the United States running, but regardless of that, there tends to be some bit of optimism no matter how you vote, and that tends to get priced in to the market. And then I'll just say that I think that DeFi has really advanced. It's evolved to a point where we see these like use cases that are native to DeFi, which are really exciting, but we also see really powerful use cases like you can go to an auction on chain for fixed term loans through like a term finance. And that's mirroring like really mature infrastructure and traditional finance. And I think when that scales, you know, you're talking about hundreds of million, billions, and eventually trillions transacting. So it's just hard to imagine that like this cycle ends anytime soon when we've come so far. There's so many folks that are not using it on a whim. You know, this isn't like, hey, I just discovered a meme coin and I bought some for the first time and I'm still new to crypto. There are a lot of folks who are very accustomed to using it now. And then you have the top of the funnel being fed by things like meme coins. You know, like you can criticize it all you want as like, maybe it doesn't have like the nerdy utility that DeFi presents it, but meme coins are simple. And I do think they're a great introduction for someone, you know, as long as they don't bet more than they're willing to lose. I think it's just like a great way to show someone, do you want to see what happens when you can trade 24/7, 365, no questions asked? All you need is the bravery to be able to click and transact and to know how to self-custody through a wallet. It's pretty cool. So anyways, the TLDR is I think we have a ways to go here. I think we're going to definitely get through this year. And I personally think the cycle is going to carry into 2025.
I definitely agree. I think we're also around the 50% mark. That's what I've been saying, is we're right there. I think the key catalyst is there's two. One is the Ethereum ETF. Like whenever that goes, we're going to have a big run, just like we did when the Bitcoin ETF went. But I think the biggest one, and this has to do with politics a little bit, is regulation. The regulation in the US is coming, and I think it's going to be, my guess anyways, that it's going to be beneficial. Part of that is going to depend on who gets elected. I think, is it going to be Trump or is it going to be Biden? If it's Trump, probably more beneficial. And if it's Biden, then I have honestly no freaking idea. But like if those catalysts, like if we get that Ethereum ETF, especially if it happens in May here, I think no one is ready for that. And so like we're going to just pump like crazy. Don't really think that happens, but if it did, that'd be nuts. And then I think if Trump gets elected and we have some good regulatory put into place, I think that this cycle could continue for much longer than most people are anticipating, because like you said, DeFi is ready, but mainstream, like retail people, I don't know that they're ever going to really use DeFi, because like they don't even use the normal financial side of things in the traditional finance, but institutions will, and they just can't right now. And so whenever that gets cleared up, there's a lot of capital that's going to come on chain, I think, to use DeFi, because like you said, there's so many use cases and it's so ready. I don't know if that can happen until we have regulation. What do you think?
Yeah, I am extremely bearish on the Biden administration ever being favorable towards crypto, which has taken me by surprise. I thought there was a chance. And I think that given some of the recent statements that were made in relation to the SEC as well, like we never seem to get any reprieve. I will say that I think it's very important, if you are able to vote, I think this is an important election to think about how you vote in favor of the industry. I'm not a single issue voter, but crypto has a humongous impact on a lot of people's lives, not just mine. Yeah. And I'm at a point where, for whatever reason, the likes of like a Senator Warren and others like her, and then you've got, of course, Gary Gensler, who they've politicized crypto, and I think they've been extremely dishonest, given the fact that they're supposed to represent the best interests of citizens. And if you look at polls of citizens, like who holds crypto now, I mean, the numbers are pretty staggering. Like, I don't know what the latest is today as of, May 2024, but we're at a point where it's something like 30, 40, 50% of folks hold some form of crypto, or at least know what it is and have like a positive impression of it. And then they are out there really using crypto almost as like a scapegoat. They're treating it like it's the boogeyman that people don't quite understand. And I think that's just extremely unfair. I think it's a sign of how incompetent like the people are that like run our government. So, this cycle, there's no doubt, like when that election comes, I mean, I'm voting in favor of crypto. At this point, I think Biden is clearly anti-crypto. And unfortunately, I don't see how I could vote for him. Anyone could vote for him. You have Trump, who's clearly pro-crypto, but then you also have someone like an RFK. And I wish we had other choices, because I think the choices are just abysmal this cycle. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not American, so I don't have a vote. I don't have a say here, but I completely agree with what you're saying.
You're lucky.
I know.
This is a failed DAO at this point. This is not a high functioning DAO anymore.
Yeah,
so.
No doubt. Okay, well, let's talk about the cycle. I mean, it sounds like at some point in 2025 is where you think it's the top. Whether regulation plays a role in this, we'll see. We kind of have to wait and see what happens with the election. What do you think happens? Right now, we've had a Bitcoin dominated cycle for the most part. Bitcoin dominance continues to rise even today as we're recording. Bitcoin continues to dominate. Altcoins bleed out. ETH bleeding out. I think no one really expected this long for Bitcoin to be leading. What happens the rest of the cycle? Is it Bitcoin remains the winner, or do you think Ethereum has a moment, or is it like Solana's now taken over and Ethereum's just going to continue to lag? Or like in terms of the majors, what are you seeing or what are you thinking?
Yeah, no, you made a great point. That was another thing that really has stood out this cycle. It's a bit odd to see Bitcoin so dominant and to not see any sort of like moment in the sun for Ether. Ether normally has broken out. Okay, I will zoom out on this and say that Ether did have an amazing bear cycle. I think that like with the merge, it did extremely well. It ran up. The entire industry was extremely bullish on it. And then I think it's fair to say that it took a backseat to Sol. And Solana, to their credit, I mean, talk about a blockchain community that was really at the point of wondering, like, will they survive? I know the builders will tell you, no, we never questioned it. And the long-term Sol holders did, but I sure as hell did. And I hold Sol, and I probably saw the light there in October. Yeah, it was early October 2023. I just remember seeing the price action saying like, okay, I think it's finally over. I think that like Sol has survived the worst of it. The worst is behind. And so I'm excited to like start to invest in the community and play with all the DeFi applications that are working there. So then I would say that since then, Sol surging clearly has had an impact on Ether. Ether, for whatever reason, I mean, Ethereum has always been this like middle child of the space. You have Bitcoin, which is the most recognizable brand, the most like well understood mission as just like a digital gold. I know it's changed over the years, but I think nowadays it's clearly digital gold. Then you've had all these other like new L1s that are faster and cheaper. Meanwhile, Ethereum has an extremely comprehensive sort of roadmap. The L2 roadmap has actually delivered now. I mean, like you can transact on most of the L2s now for less than a cent. Like I am transacting regularly on ZK Sync, Mode, Optimism, Arbitrum. Like ever since the Denkun upgrade, it's gotten that cheap.
It's
So
fun
that's been
to transact
fantastic.
on Ethereum again, at that
Yes,
cheap. It's fun
fun
again.
And what's crazy is mainnet is now like, I'd have to look at it. It's been sitting at about 10 Gwei, which means that you can send Ether for less than, let's say, like 10 cents on mainnet. I would still recommend anyone like look to L2s. Like that's where like you're going to have the most fun. Something like a Base or something like ZK Sync or Mantle, whatever, any of these. So from a user standpoint, I started with Ethereum mainnet. We go into the bear market. We've seen all of the ups and downs of the 2020, 2021 cycle. Ethereum does incredibly well. It was the best bear cycle that Ethereum ever experienced. It was the worst for Solana. And it was actually, I would argue it was a pretty brutal bear cycle for Bitcoin. Bitcoin drew down to a new low in November 2022, and Ether did not. And that was shocking, I think, to all of us. But again, it just feels like crypto always is happy to surprise you with the least expected sort of result. And so now we're at a point where, Bitcoin, I think there was a lot of folks that thought that the ETF had already been priced in and that it would probably like cool off for a bit. And I've been really happy to, I hold Bitcoin as well. It's something I just will continue to hold over the years. And so it's been fun to watch that like melt everyone's faces. And so anyways, I think that leaves us with your original questions. Where do we end the cycle eventually? Or like, how do things play out the rest of the cycle? I think if you just look at how these little like mini cycles within the bull cycle play out, ETH hasn't had its time in the sun. Crypto is extremely reflexive. So at some point when Ether takes off, I'm sure we'll look back and say, I just can't believe I didn't buy more of that. Why, why did I question whether it would see a new high? And that's just it. Ether has to see a new high. Once it does, then it can go into price discovery. I don't know. It's weird. It's like all the fundamentals are so strong. And I say that as someone who's extremely invested in Solana. I constantly am looking for new ecosystems. Like I'm excited for Monad to eventually launch and to be able to use that. I've enjoyed what little I could do on, the likes of Say. I play around with as much of Cosmos as I can. I'm not like hoping that ETH just pumps at some point. I know it as a user. There's just too much going on. There's too much activity, but this cycle is a little different with meme coins. I feel like we've dropped a few IQ points as a community, just like throwing money at meme coins at times. No offense to everyone that loves them. Like I said, I'm cheering you on. I hope you make lots of money, but I think it's important that we have lots of blockchains and lots of applications to cater to everyone's individual needs. And what's cool is we've gotten there now. Like we've got all these different blockchain communities that are thriving. I think, again, it's Bitcoin and the Bitcoin L2 space is starting to take off some. We have Ethereum being the largest of these. And then we've got Solana that's really set like a great standard in terms of they've got users that are extremely active and loud and proud to use it and onboarding more folks into the space. We've got Base as like a newer L2. So I don't know. It's weird. Like I'm so bullish on the pie growing, but we need more time. And I think I read someone tweeted out today something like, my timeline is amateur hour. I think his name's Avi from the 1000X podcast. And I kind of feel the same way. People are euphoric and happy when times are bullish, and they don't seem to recognize how ridiculous, it gets, how overheated. But then when times get a little bearish, that's a gift. That's an opportunity to be able to get into a new position. Or in my case, I tend to think about what am I holding that is looking less likely to be able to outperform. I'm better off like harvesting a loss or taking what tiny profit is there and reallocating into something like ETH that hasn't taken off, or Bitcoin that is absolutely poised to take off more, Sol, and so on. By the way, full disclosure,
Yeah.
I clearly hold those 3 tokens. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I actually tweeted out just the other day because I was thinking over the weekend, and I was like, think about how euphoric you were 60 days ago. Think about how many things you FOMO'd into 60 days ago. And now think about how wrecked you just got. And it's like, but most people are just going to do it all over again. You know what I mean? Like the next leg up is coming and everyone's going to get super euphoric. And that's why I always say like investing is, I don't know, 80%, 90% psychology, and like 10% research, because it's just so hard for people to control their emotions in this stuff. And so I agree with you completely on that. And then the other thing I just want to comment on that you said is it is a bit wild that we're not at all-time highs on ETH. When you think about the last time ETH was at all-time highs was October 2021, something like that, I think.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the burn. We didn't have the merge. We didn't have any L2s that were live. Like so much of what exists today in Ethereum ecosystem wasn't even there back then. So it would be crazy to me if Ethereum does not make all-time highs and much, much farther, I would say. But yeah, it's good analysis and great to just hear kind of your thoughts around where the majors go. Let's zoom in then now. You're using all these different protocols. And so you're using a ton of different applications. You're playing around with different use cases. What are the use cases that you're sort of eyeing right now? Obviously, DeFi is kind of your main thing. Your name is DeFi Dad, so I assume that's a big one.
Yeah.
You talked about restaking already. Is there more, or is restaking kind of your big bet right now?
That's a great question. Okay, so yeah, I think I've made clear that I think restaking is still very nascent. We haven't seen all of the major protocols launch a token. EtherFi launched their token, and full disclosure, I am invested in them. I, again, had the privilege of knowing Mike for nearly a year and participating in EtherFi, and then realizing I still had an opportunity to invest there. So no brainer there. Renzo recently launched a token, and I believe that Renzo has actually done, despite there's clearly been some setback there with their easy ETH depegging. I put that in air quotes because I mean, it really it just dropped in price for a very short amount of time, and it seems to have mostly recovered. So you have 2 multi-billion-dollar protocols there. And then we've got all these others that haven't launched a token yet. We have Puffer Finance, we have Swell, there's Kelp, there's Genesis is a smaller one right now, but one I'm keeping an eye on. So anyways, restaking is early. I think the question of whether or not those tokens will all rage for the rest of the bull run, who knows? They're new narratives though. So I clearly put my money where my mouth is there, and I've made bets on them, and I've farmed all these protocols. And if I haven't earned an airdrop there, I'm banking on airdrops with unreleased tokens. I would say the other narrative, or I'll call it an investor theme of this cycle, is the intersection of crypto and AI. It's extremely messy and confusing. I just think it's so difficult to discern right now, what are the Lego building blocks? If you can start to understand them, gosh, there's some real edge there just to understanding what that stack looks like and how they play together. I'll just briefly share that I think that I'm kind of just parroting talking points here from David Johnston, who is an open source contributor to Morpheus. And I'm not an investor there. I farmed it, but it's at more.org. That is a decentralized network for AI agents. And so if you thought the Unibot thing was really cool, it kind of dumbed down the whole DeFi UX, and you just use Telegram and type in commands and it kind of prompts you. That was really cool, but we were all reliant on Telegram, which I would never, ever sleep well at night. I don't care what they tell you about how it's self-custodied and what sort of exit plan they have if things were to go to shit. But if it can be pulled off, if a similar UX can be powered through something that is a truly decentralized, censorship-resistant network of AI agents, that's powerful. And all those buzzwords basically will just mean that I think that in the very near future, a lot of the DeFi UX that we're used to navigating manually or using power tools like Instadap or DeFi Saver or Summer.fi, a lot of that gets further abstracted away by just using AI. So now you're using an AI agent to find where's the best staking yield and how do I get into it for the least amount of gas? And everything I'm mentioning here, like it's just going to figure that out. It's going to be so dummy proof. And so there's a lot of asymmetric opportunity right now before this AI interface like hits crypto. Everything that you can do in Web3 or DeFi, crypto related, I think will eventually have some sort of AI interface. And Morpheus is one really, cool example of this.
It's interesting. If you've been around in crypto for a while, you've heard about the DeFi mullet. I think Bankless was the one who started this, which was like fintech in the front and DeFi in the back. And this is kind of the first time I'm hearing, well, maybe it's not fintech in the front, it's just AI in the front. And you just speak to an AI and it does all the DeFi in the back. That's actually quite interesting. I never really thought about it before because I always preach. I was like, look, at the way we use DeFi will be different, which is what you said. But I always think of it as we'll just use fintech apps and stuff and they'll figure it all out in the background for us. But maybe it's not the fintech apps, maybe it's AI, or maybe it's a combination of all three. I'm not sure. So is there a lot that the one thing with the AI crypto stuff is there's just a lot of crap in that space. There's a lot of people trying to capitalize on the hype. And so, you just named one, Morpheus. Is there a lot of other good ones that you're kind of playing around with or that you're using or you're investing in? Or like, what's your overall, if you were to talk about the landscape of AI, you talked about maybe the Legos and that. Is there specific things you're looking into when you look at this AI crypto space? Because I feel like it's very daunting for a lot of people to get into that narrative.
I will say I've got a pretty short answer here. I will say that like Morpheus as a decentralized network for AI agents, it's one of the very few that is making a lot of sense to me right now from a user standpoint. And again, I probably spend, the majority of my time playing with applications and kind of looking for like, what's missing here? What do I wish would be built? What exists somewhere else? Like I still think like Web3 comms drives me nuts because it feels like something that like should be more popular, but there's so much adoption of using like Telegram and Discord that I think there's just friction to like the incumbent that is already there. And so, yeah, with AI, I think we're still just that early. Like I know the vision that I just described is what everyone wants. Like we can onboard 1 billion people to crypto if we have easy, reliable, easily retrievable, but yet difficult to hack self-custody wallets. Like that's huge. We know like the history is the more power you give someone, the more like risk has actually been there that they could harm themselves if they just lose access to their keys, even though if they're properly storing those keys, like it's incredibly powerful for them. And so we're trying to get to a point where all of those benefits that I think we fantasized about having without the barriers to onboarding, that's what I think AI enables. And actually, I'll stick with, I really feel like Morpheus is one of the few that's exciting to follow. If anything, if you were looking for like some bit of credibility there outside of myself flagging it, Eric Voorhees, has been intimately involved in it since the start. And so for me, that was an early signal that like, these guys clearly are they might not do things in a way that allow them to grow the fastest, but they will build it in a way that it adheres to the principles of like building it right in crypto. Mm-hmm. Eric has always kind of stood for that. I think Shapeshift was a great example of that. So
awesome. Very interesting. Let's jump out of the AI side and let's just think about portfolio in general. So let's say someone's looking at, AI, or they're looking at restaking or, whatever else is out there. There's so many different narratives and things you can invest in. What advice do you give for someone who's like coming in and they're going to buy up a bunch of tokens? Do they allocate to a small amount and that's it? Or do you typically like just spray across as many as you can and hold a bunch? And obviously this might be different when you're talking liquid versus your private investing, but walk me through just sort of your thesis around that and how you think through allocating.
I keep it pretty simple. My liquid portfolio, I adhere to holding, what I think are the best stores of value. I would say that I'm at times painfully overallocated to ETH this cycle. I wouldn't have said that in previous cycles. I've actually continued to kind of seize the opportunity that for all that I said there and why I think ETH will go to an all-time high and go into price discovery. I've kind of used this opportunity while it feels like everyone and their mom is shitting on ETH as a store of value. I've used that as an opportunity to continue to average in. Bitcoin's just a no-brainer. It's so dominant thanks to the Bitcoin ETF and the long history of it. And it just has such a simple value prop. So I would say actually on any given day, I can't say it's exactly this, but I tend to sit like 60 to 70% in those store of value tokens. So like mine is ranking is still probably ETH at the top. Sol is actually my second largest holding. That's one that has just grown so much. Like I took the opportunity when it was at low prices to average into it. I've, participated in all the different airdrops like Jito and Camino and Wormhole and Tensor. And I'm still excited for MarginFi. So that has really grown very organically on its own without having to put more money to work there, thanks to those airdrops. And then there's Bitcoin. The rest of it, I do believe like when you're in a bull cycle, you do have to be willing to make those bets that there's going to be opportunities to invest in stuff that goes, 10 to 100x, but it's not often. And I'll say my biggest regret in previous cycles, and probably would have been this cycle if the cycle wasn't going the way it is, because Bitcoin has been so dominant. I think because Sol was so dominant and that part of my portfolio has clearly benefited. I haven't had to regret making the high risk bets on like every new shiny coin. I am blown away by what the WIF token has done. And it feels so obvious now because it was just such like a clever name. It's cute. It plays off the dog coin idea. It had like huge backing. I'm not one to really tweet about those meme coins, but like I recognize the influence that like Ansem and other folks have. And it's a standout though. I think it's proven that like not every coin is WIF. Everyone wanted to invest in the next WIF, and we've seen those meme coins really drop off. So for me, I am continuing to focus on, I would say like holding those majors that I'm extremely confident in. I'm looking for ways to borrow against them, which like I tend to use, Aave. I love using Instadat Fluid now. Fluid is like it's a newer borrowing protocol. It's got higher LTVs, super low liquidation penalties. Still has a lot of risk, of course, like any sort of borrowing protocol. And so anyways, I'm trying to hold those stores of value. I'm trying to borrow with extremely low leverage. I don't know what other folks are borrowing at, but like I personally tend to never go more than like 2x leverage myself, borrowing against like large stores of value, because I don't want to be a forced seller when the market's down. I want to be in a position to be able to buy more because we're in an uptrend or in a bear cycle. Get the hell out and look for a bottom to get back in. And then I'd say the final piece of my portfolio is, I'm obviously very fortunate that I get to invest as an angel at this point. I'd say it's a combo of I'm investing as an angel whenever I can. I would definitely say like as an angel or as a fund, I'm a little less confident that there's much time to invest this cycle. I don't know if token launches have that much more time this cycle. Like I think like easily in 3 to 4 months, like it will feel potentially silly to be looking at launching a token this cycle. You don't want to launch a token at the top of the cycle. It can just be that brutal when there's that little liquidity and everyone and their mother is selling everything. There's no rhyme or reason when you're going into the bear market. Everyone's selling everything that they have there. And so I feel for those protocols, trying to make that decision.
And we've had, 20, 30, 40 different token launches in the last few months, right? Like at some point,
right,
there's just too much supply in the market and you can't keep putting more and more. Yet there's still a lot more to come. I mean, if you think about it, and actually I wanted to transition into the airdrop side of things as well, because it is still hot. There's tons of points programs, whether we're talking restaking, L2s, whatever else, DeFi protocols, both on Solana and otherwise. There's so many. And even the ones that launch tokens, they've got season 2 and season 3. And so there's more tokens coming. And so I guess a few questions. You kind of answered it. Like, it sounds like you're saying in a few months or whenever that is, eventually this buzz isn't going to continue. And I mean, right now tokens do quite well when they launch, maybe not over the last couple of weeks, just because we've been, in a pullback. So it is what it is. But a few questions. One, is this an area people still should be earning and farming for airdrops because you think that's still where the opportunity is? Like, I believe, and it goes off with your strategy, which is stay with the store of values which is ETH and Sol, but then use that to farm airdrops. You know, if you can take your ETH, you're going to hold on to that to get exposure and then use it in restaking protocols. Like, that's an amazing idea. Same with Sol and Camino and in MarginFi, et cetera. You still get your exposure to these majors where you really limit your risk, but now you can just earn these other tokens. So I think that's, to me, that's the best play right now. I don't know if you still think that, or if you think maybe it's too late.
I agree, Kyle. Yeah, I think that because of the fact that I am wanting to sit in very large bags of those majors in my portfolio, I want to put those to work. I do think a lot, and I would caution anyone who is still newer to farming, you really want to think about how you size a position that goes into any DeFi protocol, because just remember, you could lose everything there. Again, not giving you financial advice to put it into any one protocol, but there's real risk there. I always assume I could lose everything that I'm putting into this one protocol. And so if I can put to the point we were making there, if I can put wrapped Bitcoin or Solve BTC or any sort of tokenized form of BTC, ETH, Sol, if you're a Sable, you want to look for ways that you could put Say to work. If you're a monad bull in the future, you want to look for ways that you can continue to sit long in some of those tokens. And so it's such a dream when you're looking at these LRT protocols that have been launched or supported on Pendle Finance. I think Pendle has probably had some of the biggest impact to this bull cycle. It is basically a hub for speculating, and they've got 3 different players in there who work extremely well together. And so last cycle, we didn't have this. You can buy those yield tokens, YTs, for let's say EETH. If you were buying those before season 1 ended, or now season 2 still happening, you're basically buying a lottery ticket to their airdrop, except you're guaranteed winnings. It's just a question of how much you're going to get. So you're buying it, and those YT tokens go to 0 by the time they fully mature. And normally those are 2 or 3 months out. So you buy that, you're going to get an airdrop. And as you do that, on the other side of the equation, you have the second player involved, which are people who want to earn a fixed yield. So the more people that bought up the YTE token, let's pretend it was expiring on June 30th. The more people buying it, the more buying pressure, the price of the principal token, which is basically a discounted version of ETH, keeps dropping. And so now you're buying discounted ETH. Think of it as just I'm buying it and I'm locking in a fixed rate. So as YTs went crazy and speculative mania went berserk, on the other side of it, you have people who are extremely conservative, who just want a fixed yield. They don't care about the points. They're not worried about the airdrop. That is such an amazing example of incentive design. They've really figured out how to marry the most conservative fixed yield earners who really never had a protocol that was as reliable as Pendle with the most hyper speculative users out there. And then somewhere in the middle is the LPs that are holding both of them. They don't experience much impermanent loss. I'm pretty sure it's near 0. So that has been, for me, I kind of, to bring it full circle here, I think for me, my portfolio grows from participating in blue chip airdrops. I've, again, looked at the likes of EtherFi and Renzo and Puffer and, everything else that's still coming. Swell's another big one that I'm trying to earn with. And I'm trying to earn tokens that I think, will launch at an extremely high value, or could potentially, go higher because the protocol's doing the right work to, sort of grow the space. There's one more point here just to make, though, with one mistake that I made last cycle, and I would caution anyone who lives in a similar tax jurisdiction, is when you earn an airdrop, or if you earn, let's say you're farming XYZ, as long as you're earning something in real time, or you're going to earn a chunk of income at some point, like an airdrop. In the United States, that's generally viewed as income. And so you get taxed as income, which means that, I'll just give an extreme example. I've never earned this, but if you earned $100,000 of a new token and you claim it, that day, like once it hits your wallet, my understanding, and I'm not an accountant, but my understanding is you owe that income tax on that amount priced in US dollars. And if that token literally goes to zero, it does not matter. You can harvest the loss, a capital gains loss. Like now you've got a nice big capital gain loss to, put against whatever your gains were, but you still owe the income tax. So if your income tax bracket is like, let's say 40%, someone would owe $40,000 on a token that is worth zero. And I really, I'm fortunate, like nothing too disastrous, but like, I don't think I like fully understood the risk that we were all taking as farmers in the last cycle. I've really thought about that. I think the market has clearly matured. I think that's why with these airdrops, you're seeing a healthy sell-off. And that sell-off is a great opportunity for people who are like, why the hell would I want to buy a multi-billion-dollar token? I want to get in it at a lower price and be able to be like a long-term holder of this new protocol.
Yeah. It's great advice. I think a lot of new entrants don't typically think about the tax implications of crypto. And a lot of times people get, I guess, wrecked or they learn their lesson pretty quickly. In some countries, many, they just haven't even thought about it. It's still not even really a thing. They don't tax it or they just don't even realize it. But it's coming for sure, especially as we talked about with regulation. Okay, as we wrap up here, we talked about we're 50% of the way through the cycle. At least that's what we both believe. Just give the listeners a quick advice for your thoughts on what they should do or how they can best perform over the last 50% of this cycle. Any just quick tips you have, anything that can just help them navigate the rest of the cycle?
Oh yeah, just a few simple things. One, of course, is I think it pays to be patient. So I think this is, in my portfolio, it relates to those store of value tokens. I'm not interested in selling my Sol, my ETH, or my Bitcoin into the next shiny object. I know that there's still upside ahead. I mean, I guess it's not inevitable, but it's very likely, in my opinion, that we have more upside ahead. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm going to look to continue to, realize that upside there. So I think there's a patience there. I think one thing is just thinking a lot in terms of planning. Like I am constantly writing down, if the cycle were to end, like what would I do next? Like what are some of the steps I would take? If I'm constantly writing down take profit goals, thinking about like where that is. I had some extremely, I think, unrealistic take profit goals last cycle. I recognize like the error of my ways there. The cycle doesn't give a shit about where my take profit goals were. It was just me hoping and praying that I would get to there. I love crypto Twitter is really actually good at this. There's a lot of discussion about just like, what are those top signals? And I'm constantly writing down like my priority list of like, what are some of those top signals, and thinking like, if more than a few of these were to flash, like red, like, uh-oh, it's over. What am I going to do? I'm just like really trying to mentally prepare myself. I'm someone who likes to I'm clearly extremely bullish. Like I work in the space full time. I think I've been in crypto now like 7-8 years, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. It's extremely hard for me to sell versus like wanting to just sit long and be bullish on everything. So yeah, so I guess there was the patience. There's planning to plan, I guess is the way to say that, really preparing a plan. And then I guess, yeah, the last one is just being continually curious. Like what I described, playing with these applications, I definitely fall short certain weeks. Like I will fall out of the habit of playing with enough. I've got some habits built in because I'm writing tutorials, like blog posts, whatever. And so I have to. And I've actually truthfully continued to do that because it's like a forced habit. It
right.
means that like I can't ever stop doing it. I mean, I've basically committed to newsletters that I will continue to write. And so that's something I think that is extremely difficult. I talk about being curious and using all this, but I don't want to downplay. It is extremely challenging to continue to actually do that. You get burned out is what I mean. 100%. So like try to do your best to like find a friend. For me, it's Nomadic from the Edge podcast. It's why we do the podcast together. He just digs into so much stuff that I don't. I dig into stuff that he doesn't. And we not only through work check in, but like we check in almost daily just to be like, hey, I farmed this last night. I claimed this. I did that. Like, and I can't tell you like how many times we've sort of saved ourselves from like, oh, wow, if I don't claim that token right now, like I'm not going to be able to claim it soon. So yeah, finding a good friend like that is really key.
Absolutely. Listen, thanks so much for sharing your insights. I think this will help our listeners navigate the rest of this bull market. If they want to continue to follow you and learn from you throughout this bull cycle and beyond, where can our listeners learn more from you?
Yeah, Kyle, thanks for having me on. And just, you guys do such a great job with Milk Road. So, I mean, actually, that's one of my recommendations would be like, subscribe to a newsletter like Milk Road, The Defiant, Wealth Mastery. There's quite a few out there. Obviously, Bankless does a great job. There's a lot out there. If you want to follow me, though, or learn more about all the stuff that we talked about here, follow me at DeFi_Dad on Twitter. If you just go to DeFiDad.com, all the links there to like YouTube and the podcast are there. And then again, it's called the Edge Podcast, which you can watch it on YouTube, listen to it on Spotify. We publish it in a bunch of different places, including Twitter. We'd love to get your feedback and would love to hear from you if you enjoy listening to the podcast.
Awesome. Well, DeFi Dad, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Listeners, good luck out there. Hopefully you all can capitalize on the rest of this bull market with some of the insights that DeFi Dad shared today. Otherwise, take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Milk Road Radio, the easiest path to get smarter about crypto. If you like this episode, share it and hit subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on the next one. There's also a link in the description to our free 5-minute daily newsletter where we simplify crypto for you while making you laugh. And if you're willing to step up your crypto investing game, then we'll leave a link to Milk Road Pro as well, your #1 resource to help you invest successfully in crypto. One final note, this podcast is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Crypto is risky, so you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. Thank you, friends, and we'll see you in the next one.